Hi there, everyone, and welcome to The Daily Gardener, a podcast about gardening, botanical history, and literature. I'm your host, Jennifer Ebling, and today is September 29th. Can you believe it? Today in botanical history, we celebrate an English novelist and a travel writer who loved the pleasure gardens that he created at a cemetery. We also celebrate an English writer and friend of Charlotte Bronte and a beloved and humorous garden author. We'll hear an excerpt from Allie Smith's Autumn. It's perfect for this time of year. And we grow that garden library with a book about a species among the most ancient of Earth's inhabitants. And then we'll wrap things up with the birthday of an American garden writer. But first, here's today's curated news. Well, today's curated news is a good one. It is from Gardenista. It was written by Michelle Slatella. She writes so much for them. And this is a post about vegetable garden design. Great topic, right? And in this case, Michelle talks about a DIY bean trellis. But before I cover this, I just want to take a second and have you think about your vegetable garden. Is your vegetable garden laid out the way that you want it to be? Is it life-giving to you? Does it make sense? Should it be closer to the house? Should it be further away from the house? Maybe it's completely on the wrong side of the house. So many questions for you to consider as you're thinking about your vegetable garden. But now is the time. Now is actually a great time to either reconfigure or reconstruct or upgrade or change your vegetable garden. So hats off to Michelle because she's got us thinking about vegetable garden design and redesign. And that's a big topic for gardeners this time of year. But it really is a great time of year to make that happen. Consider it your final garden project. You can get this done before the snow comes. And then when you walk outside in the spring, it's all set up the way you want it. So something to consider. Now, Michelle's post, as I mentioned earlier, is all about a DIY bean trellis. Now, I also want to just say really quickly that this is a bean trellis that was done by a blogger named April and her husband Mike. And this is a Georgia garden. And if you're looking for garden inspiration in general, you should check out what they did because their garden is absolutely beautiful. Really, really pretty. And I should also say two quick things here. Number one, these instructions are really for a bean tunnel more than a bean trellis. So this was actually like a very long arbor that they could walk under. So it really was more of a bean tunnel. And second of all, as of 2015, April and her husband, Mike, no longer lived on this particular property. It doesn't really matter though, because point in time, this was a beautiful tunnel for beans. And it just might be the perfect thing that you're looking for on your property right now as you're thinking about your vegetable garden design. So we're moving forward here. But I have to say, what I really like about this particular bean tunnel are the materials that they used. So they've got poles and copper fittings for the elbows, which are very pretty. It's got a skin of wire mesh or 14 gauge welded wire for the beans to climb up. They make a note here that they bought a roll of it and 100 feet that was 4 feet wide cost about $90 from Home Depot. So that gives you a little bit of an idea on pricing. And the other thing that I liked about this post is that they show April standing underneath the tunnel. And April's pretty tall. She's 5'10", and she's got her arm fully extended above her head, and that's where she's reaching the beans. So it looks to me like this tunnel was about 76 inches, 80 inches high. So pretty substantial. There you go. Anyway, great photos, great inspiration, lots of information, and this is super practical here. And like I said at the start of all of this, you might not be interested in the bean tunnel, but you might be interested in redesigning your vegetable garden. So yay for that. All right. Now, if you would like to track down this post, all you need to do is head on over to the Facebook group for the show, the Daily Gardener community on Facebook. Search for the word bean, and this post will pop right up. And then you can read Michelle's great post on this bean trellis/tunnel and get all kinds of inspiration from this old garden that April had with her husband, Mike, in Georgia. Now, if you're not in the Facebook group for the show, you can join at any time. All you have to do is head on up to the search bar where you look for an old friend and type in the words Daily Gardener Community. And then I will ask you 3 questions. It'll just pop right up there. You can answer them. And then I'll admit you into the group. It's just that easy. All right. It's time for today's botanical history. Here's botanical history for today, September 29th. It was on this day in 1760 that William Beckford, the English novelist, travel writer, and architect, was born. Reclusive and eccentric, William was best known for his romance novel that he wrote in 1782 called The History of Caliph Vathek. William was fascinated with Italianate gardens, and he especially enjoyed the landscape at Lansdowne Cemetery after he installed a pleasure garden there. And it was there that he designed a large tower, and he'd hoped to be buried in its shade near one of his favorite dogs. But it was not to be. The ground was considered unconsecrated, and the dog only made that situation even more untenable. And so William's sarcophagus was moved to Abbey Cemetery in Bath, and that's where he is today. William once wrote, "Flowers are the sweetest things God ever made and forgot to put a soul to." And today is a happy heavenly birthday for Elizabeth Gaskell, the English writer. She was born on this day in 1810. She married a Unitarian minister named William Gaskell, and his work led them both to help and advocate for the poor. In 1850, Elizabeth met Charlotte Bronte at the summer home of a mutual acquaintance, and the two became instant friends. And once when Charlotte visited her, her shyness got the best of her, and Charlotte hid behind some curtains rather than meeting other visitors who had stopped by the Gaskells' Manchester home. After Charlotte died in 1855, her father, Patrick Bronte, asked Elizabeth to write her biography, which resulted in The Life of Charlotte Bronte by Elizabeth Gaskell. It was published in 1857. Now, Elizabeth's other work included the novels Mary Barton, which came out in 1848, Cranford, which she wrote between 1851 and 1853, and North and South, if you remember that TV miniseries. She wrote that between 1854 and 1855. So she was a very busy writer, and I got a kick out of this little tidbit that I found. She once told her daughter, Marianne, "It is hard work writing a novel all morning, spudding up dandelions all afternoon, and writing again at night." I hear you, Elizabeth. Well, Elizabeth was a gardener, and she loved flowers, especially roses. Gardens, flowers, fragrances, and country life permeate her writing. She didn't have to think much about incorporating it into her stories. It was such a part of her life. Of course, Elizabeth wrote about all of those things. And to give you an idea of how second nature this was to Elizabeth, here's something she wrote in her book Ruth that came out in 1853. She wrote, "With a bound, the sun of a molten fiery red came above the horizon, and immediately thousands of little birds sang out for joy, and a soft chorus of mysterious glad murmurs came forth from the earth, waking the flower buds to the life of another day." Pretty poetic. In her book, Wives and Daughters, that came out in 1865, she wrote, I would far rather have 2 or 3 lilies of the valley gathered for me by a person I like than the most expensive bouquet that could be bought. Hand-picked, the way to go. And today is the birthday of Jeffrey B. Charlesworth, the garden author. He was born on this day, September 29th in 1920. Regarding the devil's claw or tufted horned rampion, Physoplexus camosa, he wrote, we like people not just because they are kind, good, and pretty, but for some indefinable spark, usually called chemistry, that draws us to them and begs not to be analyzed too closely. Just so with plants. In that case, my favorite has to be Physoplexus camosa. And this is not merely because I am writing at the beginning of July when the plant approaches maximum attractiveness. In his book, A Gardener Obsessed from 1994, I think it's a garden classic, he wrote, a garden is a gymnasium, an outlet for energy, a place where accidents occur, where muscles develop, and fat is shed. Yes, 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 and yes. He also wrote in that book, uneventful living takes up most of our time. Gardening is part of it, possibly a trivial part to the rest of the world, but by no means less important to the gardener than the big events. In his book, The Opinionated Gardener from 1988, he wrote, every gardener knows this greed. I heard a man looking at a group of plants say, I have all the plants I need. Ridiculous. He said it because he was leaving for South America the next day, and he didn't have his checkbook, and it was December, and he didn't have a cold frame. It's time for today's Unearthed Words. Today's Unearthed Words come to us from Allie Smith. This is from her book, Autumn, which is a beautiful book. It's got a great cover. This book was a Man Booker Prize finalist, a Washington Post notable book, and one of the 10 best books of the year from the New York Times back in 2017. And you can get a used copy on Amazon using the link in today's show notes for about $4. So fabulous steal. If you're looking for a little fall gift for yourself or for a garden friend, this book would be perfect. And here's the excerpt that I chose for you today. A minute ago, it was June. Now the weather is September. The crops are high, about to be cut. Bright, golden. November, unimaginable. Just a month away. The days are still warm. The air in the shadows sharper. The nights are sooner, chillier. The light a little less each time. Dark at 7:30, dark at 7:15, dark at 7. The greens of the trees have been duller since August, since July really. But the flowers are still coming. The hedgerows are still humming. The shed is already full of apples, and the trees still covered in them. The birds are on the power lines. The swifts left a week ago. They're hundreds of miles from here by now. Somewhere over the ocean. It's time to grow that garden library with today's book, Moths by David Lees and Alberto Zilli. This book came out in 2019, and the subtitle is A Complete Guide to Biology and Behavior. In this book, David and Alberto give us an expert reference to the vital insect group of moths. In many cases, moths rely on their ability to camouflage to survive and reproduce. Now, as gardeners, we're often attracted to brightly colored butterflies, but the work of moths in the environment is equally important. Now, of course, you can't have a practical guide to moths without spectacular illustrations, and this book has that in spades. Readers will come away with an incredible appreciation for the diversity of these winged insects and their miraculous life cycle, from egg to larva to cocoon to airborne adult. This book is 208 pages of the marvelous world of moths, and our world would be the lesser without them. You can get a copy of Moths by David Lees and Alberto Zilli and support the show using the Amazon link in today's show notes for around $20. Finally, here's something sweet to revive the little botanic spark in your heart. Today, we wish a happy heavenly birthday to Jean Hersey, who was born on this day, September 29th, in 1902. She was an American garden writer and magazine feature writer. She lived in Westport, Connecticut, and she had a meadow instead of a front lawn, and a woodland and a stream for a backyard. She was often ahead of her time when it came to gardening, and she wrote over a dozen books. And I love that her very first book was called I Like Gardening. It came out in 1941. I'm trying to get my hands on a copy. And one reviewer said this about I Like Gardening when it came out. They wrote, "It makes one fairly itch to start a garden, bugs and insects included." Well, Jean is probably best known for another book of hers that I absolutely adore. I read it probably, I would say 3 or 4 times a week. I am referencing Jean's book. It's called The Shape of a Year, and it came out in 1967. It's a year-long almanac of her garden life. And since we're closing out September, I thought I would share with you what she wrote in her chapter on September. She writes something for each month of the year. Lots of little stories for each month. Just a fantastic book. But for September, I found one of her little stories that I thought was particularly charming. And so I wanted to close out today's show with this little story by Jean. So without further ado, here's what she wrote. September is a sweep of dusky purple asters, a sumac branch swinging a fringe of scarlet leaves, and the bittersweet scent of wild grapes when I walk down the lane to the mailbox. September is a golden month of mellow sunlight and still clear days. The ground grows cool to the touch, but the sun is still warm. A hint of crisp freshness lies in the early hours of these mornings. Small creatures in the grass, as if realizing their days are numbered, cram the night air with sound. Everywhere, goldenrod is full out. One of the excitements of the month is the Organic Garden Club show. Bob and I were prowling around the night before, considering what I might enter and studying all our tomatoes. The large ones seemed pretty good, but all had the common scars on the top that don't make a bit of difference in the eating, but aren't good for a show. There was a special charm to the smaller ones, volunteers, that grew out of the midst of the chard. Each one was perfect, not a blemish. These were larger than the cherry tomatoes. They're about the size of ping pong balls, Bob said. They must be a cross between the ordinary large ones and the cherry ones. Say, why not enter them as ping pong tomatoes? So I did, selecting 3 perfect ones, and they won first prize over all tomatoes. Well, congratulations from the future, Jean Hersey, on your ping pong tomatoes. Wasn't that a great story? Thanks for listening to The Daily Gardener. And remember, for a happy, healthy life, garden every day. The Daily Gardener is produced in lovely Maple Grove and Wyoming, Minnesota. If you want to read today's show notes, just head on over to thedailygardener.org. And while you're there, be sure to sign up for my free Friday newsletter. And don't forget that you have a standing invitation to join the free Facebook group for listeners of the show. Just search for Daily Gardener Community the next time you're on Facebook and request to join. Last but not least, you can always get in touch by emailing me at jennifer@thedailygardener.org. I'm your host, Jennifer Ebling, and as always, have a great day in the garden, and we'll see you tomorrow.